We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
Good evening and welcome to Neil Oliver Live. On tonight's show, former Brexit Secretary David Davis joins me to discuss Britain's role in the abolition and demolition of the slave trade. I'll be speaking to a scientist behind the discovery of the largest and most complete fossil sea dragon ever discovered in the UK. And my Great Britain this week is an 82-year-old who took up skateboarding during lockdown. All of that lies ahead after your latest news headlines.
Thank you, Neil. I'm Simon Pusey in the GB newsroom. The Prime Minister is facing mounting pressure to resign from opposition leaders, but also from MPs within his own party. It follows a series of allegations that parties, including regular Wine Fridays, took place at Number 10 while COVID restrictions were in place. Former Tory Minister Tobias Ellwood says the Prime Minister must lead or step aside, but Sir Keir Starmer says it's in the national interest for the Conservative Party to get rid of Boris Johnson.
Moral authority matters in relation to enforcing the COVID rules, but we've got other massive challenges facing this country, massive challenges. We've got a Prime Minister who is absent, he's literally in hiding at the moment, and unable to lead. And so that's why I've concluded that he's got to go. And of course there's a party advantage in him going, but actually it's now in the national interest that he goes. So it's very important now that the Tory party does what it needs to do and gets rid of him.
The Foreign Secretary has called for Moscow to halt its aggression amid fears of an invasion in Ukraine. In a tweet, Liz Truss says Russia is waging a disinformation campaign intended to destabilise Ukraine and therefore justify an invasion. She's urging President Vladimir Putin to de-escalate the situation after more than 100,000 Russian troops have been posted along the Ukraine border. Meanwhile, the chair of the Defence Select Committee is warning Russia will likely play with the gas price if Western powers impose sanctions in the wake of Ukraine tensions. In an exclusive interview with GB News, Tobias Ellwood said further sanctions would likely cause the Russian president to restrict the amount of gas his country exports, causing price rises in Britain. In the UK, the energy price cap is due to be reviewed and could already increase by as much as 50% due to limited supply. In the next few hours, tennis player Novak Djokovic is expected to hear the verdict of his visa appeal hearing. The star is currently in detention at a hotel in Melbourne ahead of a decision. His legal team have said they'll argue the decision to deny him entry is irrational. His exemption from vaccine requirements to play in the Aussie Open has prompted widespread anger in the country.
It's very clear that Novak Djokovic is one of the best players of the history, without a doubt. But there is no one player in history that's more important than an event. Australian Open is much more important than any player. So if he's playing, finally, okay. If he's not playing, Australian Open will be a great Australian Open, with or without him.
An underwater volcano that erupted in Tonga today has triggered tsunami warnings as far as Japan. The country's Met Office has issued evacuation orders with waves as high as 3 meters expected in the South Pacific Islands. They've urged people not to go near the sea until the warnings have been lifted. No damage or casualties have yet been reported. TV, online and DAB Plus radio. This is GB News. Now it's back to Neil Oliver Live.
Thanks for that, Simon. Now, according to the Beatles, all you need is love. It's a fine sentiment, heartfelt and hopeful. I would say, though, that once you've been round the houses a few times, seen a bit of life, you come to realise that in all things that matter, from affairs of the heart to business dealings, it's really about trust. Our trust is a gift we choose to give. It's a pricelessly valuable commodity and may form the foundation for a happy life, for long and fruitful relationships. But given unwisely and in error, offered up to an undeserving recipient and then abused by them, trust is as fragile as a soap bubble. In truth, trust is a one-time only offer. Real, meaningful trust can only be given once. Once the soap bubble is burst, there's no fixing it. Once trust is gone on account of its being misused, it never really comes back. Not in the pure form of before. After a breach of trust, everything is different and forever, and in our hearts, we all know that's true. A broken vase might be glued back together, but you could never again be as confident as before about filling it with water. A functioning and civilised society is also based in large part upon trust. Short of the application of physical force, tanks on the streets, soldiers with rifles, the power of democratically elected governments, such as we have been taught to listen to, even to take for granted, is just an illusion. A handful of people is put in charge of the affairs of state, and a multitude of citizens lets them get on with it. This arrangement is wholly predicated, however, on trust by the many of the few. If the handful of people trusted with keeping the lights on and the streets safe to walk abuses and loses the trust of the millions, then that functioning society is no more. What follows is either despotism that must be sustained at the point of a bayonet, or anarchy and chaos. Without recourse to the tanks and bullets, that untrustworthy and untrusted handful of people is suddenly and utterly powerless, impotent in the face of all those they have wronged. All at once the curtain is pulled back to reveal the Wizard of Oz for the pitiful little con man he really is. Fool me once, shame on you, as the old adage has it. Fool me twice, shame on me. Over and over again during the last 2 years, we have listened to the handful of people, and by that I mean not just the elected government, but their supposed opposition as well, craven and complicit in the abuse of trust, and always we have been let down. I say we have been deliberately and cynically misled for many months. Repeatedly, we have been told things that were, to say the very least, subsequently proven to be incorrect and incomplete. Countless statements were made with the intention of frightening us into obedience. Information that might have enabled us better to understand the reality of the situation, better to make informed decisions for ourselves, has been withheld or suppressed. Worse yet, ridiculed and dismissed as nonsense and conspiracy theories. Time and again we have had to listen to experts predicting catastrophes that never happen. We've been told that our submission to this or that inconvenience, indignity or imposition on our freedom and rights will secure a return to the normality of before. Normality freed from the constant fear that what is permitted today will be forbidden again tomorrow. The cumulative effect of all of this has been the erosion of trust. Trust in elected representatives, trust in scientists and even in science itself, trust in the mainstream media, trust in medical professionals, trust in the NHS. The list is long indeed. Also desperately damaged, perhaps beyond repair for many, is trust in the police. It's been trotted out repeatedly that here in Great Britain we are policed by consent, which is to say that for around 200 years the police force has based its legitimacy not on the application of naked force, as is the case elsewhere in the world, but on account of having the confidence, the trust of the British people. During the past 2 years, however, the police have increasingly been seen, rightly or wrongly, as enforcers of government will. In the face of public protests, they have been seen to favour those in tune with official sentiment and rigorously to oppose those deemed dissenting from the government narrative of the moment. Among many errors, this one is especially gross. If a point is reached when too many citizens come to regard police officers not as people to be trusted, but as a group to be avoided, then a Rubicon has been crossed. There will be no going back. I say again, trust is precious and fragile. Collective trust in society is made ultimately of the trust of individuals. Each of us must be persuaded that the society of which we are a part is a good thing, something worth having and defending, honest and humane, a cradle for our best interests. Each of us must believe, and have genuine reasons for believing, that our efforts as citizens are helping maintain something honourable and right. Last week, in the thick of Downing Street Partygate, the Labour Party released a statement by an NHS nurse named only as Jenny. As news broke about suitcases full of wine and dancing in the basement of number 10, Jenny was quoted as saying, "I remember the 20th of May 2020 vividly. I spent hours on the phone to a man who was in the hospital car park, utterly desperate to see his wife. He begged, wept, shouted to be let in, but we said no for the greater good of everyone else. She died unexpectedly and alone as the government had a party." I read the words over and over. Utterly desperate, begged, wept, shouted. We said no for the greater good. She died alone. The tone was even ambiguous somehow, so that it was unclear whether the talk of the greater good was sincere or sarcastic. It was also gallingly and eye-poppingly disingenuous hypocrisy, coming as it had in the form of a tweet from a Labour Party that has, while supposedly in opposition, been nothing but a bag carrier and excited accomplice of the application of the very rules that gave us Nurse Jenny's testimony. Regardless, how on earth could we have reached a point where, in the face of a disease with such a high recovery rate, such a scenario was ever deemed appropriate and also unavoidable? For want of a surname or any other details, we cannot know if Jenny is a real person or a composite brought together by a PR professional to illustrate a general point. There is, however, no hiding from the fact that the picture painted of a human being broken and crying, denied the right to be by the side of someone dearly loved, holding her hand at the end of her life, was made real too many times to count during the course of this human tragedy we have called a pandemic. That such traumas were inflicted by authority figures who then flouted their own diktats, presumably because they knew there was no need for them, because they had evidently gleaned that there was nothing much for them to fear from the disease, is a thought hardly to be borne by decent people. I struggle to know how even to begin to express my horror at how far we have fallen as a society. Breach of trust is one thing, but if this is where we are now, then we are close to lost entirely. A civilised society must hold some things as sacred, never to be broken or dishonoured. Throughout this crisis, the sanctity of the family has been ignored and set aside, apparently for the greater good. Family members have been deliberately isolated from one another, denied the togetherness that makes life worth living. Men, women and children have been consigned to lonely deaths from all manner of ailments, while those they loved broke their hearts elsewhere. Attacks on the family are always in the playbook of those with a view to establishing new power and new control. But there are bonds between people that no government has the right to deny, far less to seek to break. As the marriage vows have it, so they are no longer two, but one flesh. Therefore, what God has joined together, let no one separate. If we are to condemn husbands to scream their grief in cars in hospital car parks while wives die alone, then are there any leaders left anywhere in the land worthy of the trust of decent people? Now, of course, all of that's my opinion. We like to hear from everyone on this show, though, so you can email and tell us what you think on gbviews@gbnews.uk, and you can tweet us as well, @gbnews. If I can, if there's time, I'll read out some of your comments a little later in the show. Now, to help me along with the next 2 hours here on GB News, on TV and on digital radio, my wonderful panel. Polly Mackenzie, Chief Executive of Demos, the think tank, and Tom Buick, writer and podcaster. Hello again, Tom. Hi there. Lovely to have you back.
Yeah,
and
great to
lovely
be
to
back.
meet you, Polly, for the first time. Tom, am I alone, or do you still trust our political class and more broadly their advisors?
Well, not on the basis of what we're seeing really throughout the pandemic, and not just the alleged parties, although I think we've seen enough facts and enough revelations to say with some confidence that there's some serious breaches, not only of the guidelines, but possibly of the law as well. But for me, I think this speaks to a wider malaise in British politics, which frankly goes back decades, but arguably at least goes back to the referendum in 2016, when then, the whole of the British political establishment was found to be completely offside with the majority of British people. By that, I mean, obviously, the decision by the British people to exit the European Union. And we're in a very similar situation now where the trust, the integrity, the honesty is clearly not there. And there was this sort of correction mechanism, wasn't there, in British politics after the war, where politicians who knew themselves that they were falling short of the standards that we expect in our public life did the honourable thing, and they went before it became an ongoing scandal. You saw that in the Falklands War, for example. It wasn't the fault of the Foreign Secretary Carrington that that Argentina invaded the Falklands, but he resigned over that issue. We've seen it on countless occasions since then. But I don't know what it is. Maybe Polly's got a perspective on this as someone that supported the coalition government. But in the last decade, we've seen ministers time after time fall short on this key issue of trust and not do the honourable thing and resign their ministerial position.
How do you feel about that, Polly? Have we reached a new low, or is it just more of the same?
I think we have reached a new low. And what I found really compelling about what you were saying is that it doesn't allow us to dismiss trust as a sort of side incremental thing. Lots of the government's response over the course of this week and its defenders has been to say, sure, this is bad, but let's get back to the important business of governing. And what's important in what you've got to say is that understanding that trust is actually fundamental to the basic concept of getting back to the business of the day, because it's actually what holds a society together. It's what holds individuals together and families together as communities, the trust between them. There's actually some evidence that it helps to boost economic growth, because if you trust each other, you go into business arrangements more and you sign better contracts and you spend less time in the courts. But it's that trust between the citizens and the state, the operations of the state, which are absolutely key to us. And, President Biden spoke on the anniversary of the January the 6th events at the Capitol. And one of the things he said was that leaders of China and Russia had said to him, they don't believe in democracy. They think that democracies will fail because they're too slow to act. They don't see that democracy has any kind of competitive advantage, as we did in the Cold War, where we assumed that the freedom of capitalism and the freedom of democracy would prevail against those kind of the communist states. That Russia and China now think that we democracies are so busy fighting with one another and arguing that we never make any decisions. We can't keep up with climate change and technological change and demographic change, so we will fail. For me, what we have to understand, and I've just written a book called Making Democracy Work, which kind of sets this out in detail, is that it's actually trust which can be sustained and developed by successful collaborative democracy, which is the only competitive advantage democracy has against those alternative autocratic models. And if we don't get this right, which we are catastrophically not getting it right at the moment, then, the power in the world will shift and autocracy will prevail.
I felt you wanted to come in there, Tom.
Well, I agree with a lot of what Polly's saying there, but in the end, it comes also down to personal integrity. Now, one of the values of Britain, which I've always admired, is compared to other countries and some of the regimes that Polly mentions there, where clearly you have politicians, dictators, autocrats who believe that they are above the law and they believe that they are beyond impunity. And what I think we're seeing in Britain, which something we haven't seen certainly since the Second World War, is this sort of sense of people at the highest level, in the highest echelons in public life, whether they're elected or they're senior officials, are somehow beyond impunity, that they can act in a way that means it doesn't, if nobody's looking, or they think nobody's looking, they can get away with it. And that, I think, is something we're going to have to come to terms with.
I think there's a feeling of stress in society at the moment. You can feel it, and obviously it's evident there in the mental health crisis that we've got coming on as like a tsunami. And I think it's down to lack of trust. As you said about holding families and communities together, if a population can't trust that the people governing are trustworthy, then that brings in an element of smouldering stress all the time, where you're slightly suspicious that the presumed leaders are actually out to get you. It undermines everything. It's like rot. It's like a sort of rising damp that undermines and corrupts everything.
So I think you're completely right, and I think this started with lots of the complacency kind of towards the end of the Cold War of thinking that liberal democracy had prevailed and everything was going to be great. You then get the third way movement in the US and the UK of saying that actually the arguments between left and right have been settled. Demos, the think tank I run, actually published a paper saying life after politics. An extraordinary arrogance that characterised the very end of the 20th century. That led to a very technocratic system of government, which was basically that we clever people with spreadsheets will figure out the right thing to do and we will impose it on you. And you'll be grateful in the end. And I think that then foments a lot of the resentment that you're talking around things like Brexit, all sorts of left behind towns, lots of what has driven anger in post-industrial areas of kind of being told that don't worry, even though your life seems to be getting worse and certainly falling behind others, it's fine because the spreadsheet says that we're doing the right thing for you. So instead, what you get is feeding on that absolute frustration and alienation is a group of more kind of strongman leaders who come in and do have that arrogance and contempt. And I think Trump really kind of just broke something open of quite what you could get away with in terms of just basically lying.
Well, hold that thought. We have to go to a break, and after that break we'll be talking to MP David Davis about the history of slavery, and we'll be discussing how far Britain really went into seeking to dismantle that terrible trade. But first, the weather.
Looking ahead to tomorrow's weather, and the UK is looking a little wet to start in the north, but as this band of rain clears south, things will brighten up. Let's take a look at the details. There may be a few lingering showers around first thing tomorrow in the southwest. For most, though, it will be a dry start with some sunny breaks in the cloud. Meanwhile, in the southeast, things are set to get off to a fine start with some lengthy sunny spells. It will be chilly, though. There will be showery outbreaks of rain across parts of Wales, mainly to the south. Further northern, it should be drier and sunnier as well. Around Manchester tomorrow, it will get off to a mostly fine start with some sunshine. However, a weather front is going to spread from the north during the morning, leading to outbreaks of rain. And this is the picture in the northeast, which will start tomorrow with plenty of cloud and spells of rain, though this will all clear, leading to a brighter and milder day than of late. For Scotland, there will be plenty of sunshine on offer. There will be patchy cloud, which could bring a few showers, mainly over the mountains with some sleet or snow. And a damp start for Northern Ireland, but the early rain should quickly move away, and then the cloud will break up, meaning it will turn brighter here as we go through the morning. As the weather front pushes southwards, it will bring cloud and outbreaks of rain with brighter weather in the north, and that's how the weather is shaping up during tomorrow morning.
Hello there, I'm Eamon.
And I'm Isabel.
And you're watching the GB News digital stream across the United Kingdom.
And around the world.
If you're here in the UK, you can also watch us on your TV screen. GB News is Freeview channel 236.
On Sky, we're channel 515.
626 on Virgin Media.
Just remember, you might need to retune your TV to watch the channel.
Yeah, and if you are doing that, find out more about retuning by going to gbnews.uk. Join my show Farrar, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate,
and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilized conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon.
And Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
Welcome back to Neil Oliver Live. Now, recently, the jury in a court in Bristol considered the case of 4 people who had confessed to their part in pulling down a statue of Edward Colston, slaver and philanthropist. The verdict was not guilty, a result likely to pose all manner of legal complexities in the future. All of that notwithstanding, my next guest feels it's high time all of us paid attention to the wider story of Britain's involvement in the slave trade. Having been an enthusiastic participant in the human misery of it all in the 18th century, Britain dedicated fortunes and many lives to dismantling the trade in the 19th century. The author of an article calling for broader understanding of a complex and fascinating story is Conservative MP David Davis. Joins me now. Thanks for coming in again.
My pleasure.
This is a story that I think it's so broad-ranging. It's very hard to contemplate saying much meaningfully about it in so short a space of time, but we must attempt it. What did you make, first of all, of that verdict in Bristol?
On the one hand, I sort of agreed with the protesters about Colston. I just didn't agree with the way they did it. You know, there's a better democratic way to do these things. But the other thing about it was, and the jury basically voted, I think, as the defence attorney argued, with history rather than with facts, with what they felt was the sort of moral position. But it worried me slightly because my knowledge, and I guess most historians' knowledge, of our history in the slave trade is not one of dark times. I mean, some of it is, as you said. I mean, we were party to shipping over 3 million slaves, along with every other maritime power. But Britain, and Britain alone, actually brought this whole trade to an end through a fantastic exercise of diplomatic activity, of political activity, of literally giving up money, giving up the financial, but also an enormous military operation on the west coast of Africa.
Then that dismantling of which you speak is often routinely dismissed as mere expediency, economic and political expediency, but you would counter that.
Oh yeah. I mean, look, there is a namesake of mine called David Breon Davis, who's he died a few years ago, but he was a Yale professor who's the great expert on slavery, and people should read him about the effect of the Enlightenment. You know, the way people's views changed, and before 300 years ago, slavery was accepted everywhere in the world, pretty much. Not everybody took part in it, but everybody accepted it, and for thousands of years. And then all of a sudden, you know, you had the comments of philosophers suddenly started getting political purchase. You know, Pitt made a big speech when he was Prime Minister. Then a few years later, in 1807, we moved a big movement. And then after that, Castlereagh, Palmerston, all committed a sixth of the Royal Navy, the biggest navy in the world, to go to a place where the annual death rate was 6%, obviously from action, but also from yellow fever and malaria. And sailors volunteered year after year. We had captains using their own money to buy ships so they could catch the slavers. You know, we had one of them being sued in the London courts because he'd done that. They were disobeying orders effectively because you didn't have phones in those days, so they'd be going into Brazilian ports or going down the African coast and stopping the African kingdoms actually from taking slaves. All sorts of fantastic, almost stories of daring do, like out of Hornblower, but really driven by this common moral cause. This wasn't people calculating what's our national interest. It was people doing something that was right.
Why do you think that movement crystallised where it did, when it did? I mean, after all, at the time that it began to happen, there was no one on the planet that could have forced the hand of the British Empire. So why did it happen when it did?
No, it started, I mean, actually, while we were still heavily involved in slavery, indeed near the peak of it, you had a guy called Sancho, the first African actually to have an obituary written in a British paper, and then Equiano and Clarkson, religiously driven, Wilberforce, religiously driven. From my part of the world, every MP where I live says they're a successor of Wilberforce, all largely driven by religion. Although it has to be said, every religion at the time sort of approved of slavery, so long as it wasn't their own followers or enslaved, you know. Mm-hmm. But nevertheless, Methodists and other sorts of religionists were very much driven by it, but it's basically a moral sense that this was wrong. Remember what was also happening at the time, you know, off the back of the sort of capitalism development, was that people started to think, you know, self-improvement is something that should be the right of everybody. Well, clearly a slave doesn't have a right to self-improvement. So there are a whole series of moral themes that went through it, and it just became a passion. When it went through the House of Commons, I think the vote was something like 283 to 16. You know, that was how clear and one-sided the argument had become.
When it is such a story, yeah, that aspect of the slave trade is something that Britain can be rightly proud of. Why do we know only one side of the story? Why is Britain's role in the wholehearted, full-throated dismantling of that trade an unknown to most?
To be honest, I really have no idea. It's why I was sort of protesting in my article, because it seems to me, I mean, this is a really important thing. I mean, you know, in the pages of history, most of history is driven by self-interest. There's no two ways about it. We shouldn't kid ourselves. But this was something different. It was the most expensive piece of foreign policy by any nation ever.
Some percentage of the GDP.
2% of our GDP from 1807 to about 1860 went, you know, off the back of that. It was, as I say, a sixth of the Royal Navy. Later on, in about 1830-ish, we paid out £20 million in those days, so you're talking about billions of pounds, to free a lot of slaves in the empire, because, you know, this was sort of stepwise thing. So this was just over and over and over again commitment to it. And as I say, it's a story of daring do. You know, it's a really interesting piece of. If I were a history teacher at a school, I'd want to teach my kids this. You know,
Tom, if I can come to you, is that a revelation to you, or are you aware that Britain was so you know, enthusiastic in one century in being slavers, and then in the next to taking it apart in its entirety?
Like most people that paid attention during their history lessons at school, you know, you're aware of Wilberforce, you're aware not just of the, you know, so-called progressive for the age, things that Britain did at the time, not least on the back of, you say, the Enlightenment, David, and sort of moral sentiment around slavery, but you're also aware that a lot of characters, you know, from Francis Drake onwards, got very, very rich off the back of slavery, including obviously Edward Colston
without a doubt,
in Bristol. But, you know, again, in the long arc of history, which I think is what you're hinting at here, you know, Britain can also be proud of the role that it has played, not least using at the time its military force in the Royal Navy, boarding actually US ships, for example, that had slaves that were en route to plantations. So, you know, we didn't have a civil war like the Americans did over slavery. We didn't end up in a more democratic age trying to justify, for example, apartheid like South Africa did, and indeed, you know, arguably German colonies as well in Africa, like Namibia. So what you know, I struggle with, though, about the debate today when I look at, you know, these activists is why for the ancestors of those slaves are we having such an active debate about reparations for that group of people when, frankly, you know, there are British citizens who can look back through their ancestry and they'll find somewhere, you know, some feudal enslavement and could make a case for why, you know, the British government should cough up, you know, money towards them because they lost their land, you know, during the Highland clearances, or so, you know, I mean, how far back, I guess, do we have to go?
History is full of moral debt. I mean,
right,
you know,
yeah.
every age of history and pretty much every government, you know. And the other side of this, I mean, one of the reasons the slave trade was driven, apart from the sugar industry, was driven, and the spice industry was driven towards West Africa, was that the Ottoman Empire had taken away the other source of slaves.
Yeah.
Slave and Slav are similar for a reason. It's not a coincidence, you know. It used to be that European slaves came from Eastern Europe to a very large extent, and that changed around. The behaviour of the Ottomans was terrible too, and we actually intervened in that late on. After we finished this battle in the Atlantic, we went round and started trying to deal with East African trading. So it's a huge story, and
Paulie,
it ought to be on the syllabus.
Paulie, do you think we have a tendency to dwell entirely at the moment on the dark and the shameful aspects of our shared history and heritage? And if so, why?
I don't think we do. I learnt about Wilberforce in my British history lessons, and I only learnt about the horrors of the slave trade in American history lessons. That's my schooling. It's one example. I've no idea if you are to, you know, actually analyse the total discourse, all of the lessons. I don't know. I'd be fascinated to see a study of that. Always in history, when you think about history, you have to remember the fable of the four blind men trying to describe an elephant. And one is holding the tail and says an elephant is like a rope, and another is holding the ear and says it's like a fan. I think what's really dangerous is that there are some activist groups who are there saying that Britain is evil because they're only holding the ear of the elephant and they're saying it's like a fan. Yeah. But equally, there are others who are saying Britain is only ever a moral crusader, has only ever done good, and the empire was perfect because they were only holding the tail. All of us have to make that effort to actually try and understand all of the different parts of the elephant, recognising that some of it is uncomfortable and some of it is daring do that we can absolutely be proud of, even if we had no part to play in it whatsoever. You know, and it's complicated, it's difficult, and there are always more things to understand about the elephant. None of us should ever kind of like just stop. That's what I worry about. Really, it's not that everybody's obsessed with saying one thing. It's that is that different groups are incapable of listening to each other and recognising the complexity that all of these things, which seem contradictory, can actually be true at the same time.
No, I think, and the more we understand about these massive stories, the richer they become, and the better served we are.
Yeah,
you're quite right. You know, the tail and the ear together, and the rest of the elephant. You know, it's a much richer experience, and you can take on the chin, the bad side, as long as you're also given, when it's appropriate, the antidote and something, you know, an other side of the same story. Now, David, while I've got you here, we've got a video.
This sounds embarrassing.
Is this David as a club?
I don't think you're in the shot. Everything that's been going on with these with the parties at number 10. I think we've got the pictures coming up now. Is there some sort of concerted attempt going on that it's all happening now, when so much must have been known for all of this time, that it's all suddenly bursting forth at this moment? Is there something coordinated?
Well, it may well be. I don't know for sure. I mean, if you look at, I mean, just talking to my colleagues, the number of emails they get, for example, those who are in very Tory areas get a relatively small number, and those who are in very Labour areas get much bigger. Now, I'm not talking, you know, twice as many. I'm talking like 45 to 50 in one area and 800 in another, you know. And that sort of implies that somebody's getting emails sent, you know, local Labour organisation, whatever. Now, to be blunt with you, I don't blame them for that. I mean, as Boris said at the dispatch box, you know, Starmer is paid to try and get him to pull him down. That's his job. But yeah, I guess it's quite likely that there's an operation underway.
I spoke at the top of the show about trust.
Yeah.
And I feel genuinely, in a way that I've never felt before, that there's been a fundamental erosion down at the basal layer of trust. Can this group, can this iteration of the political class regain that trust, or has too much of it been squandered?
Look, I mean, I've been around quite a while, and what you're describing, the erosion of trust, is certainly there, but it's been going on for a long time. You know, when I first came in the House of Commons, my two predecessors were the last two double decorated, you know, M Military Cross and DSO members of the House of Commons. They were from that generation of wartime, you know, and when you talked about Peter Carrington, Lord Carrington, and resigning over the Falklands, he came from that generation too. He was a tank commander in Normandy, you know. And I think they were brought up to a very, very stiff code of duty. I mean, for all sorts of reasons. I mean, they had to lead regiments into battle, and their soldiers had to trust them. And to get that trust, you have a very strict code of honour. And I think that slipped a bit. I mean, you also mentioned the point about technocratic. Politics today is technocratic to a fault. You know, I mean, you made the comment, I think, and Polly made a comment as well, about sort of being led by spreadsheets. You know, you can't do that. I mean, the truth of the matter is that there appears to be in modern politics less belief, less high principle, and as a result, less commitment to a particular cause, and that also erodes trust. You know?
Why would that be? I mean, something as profound as you would imagine, heartfelt as principle and conviction. You know, I appreciate your point that you're talking about a generation that had been through the crucible of war and had seen young men die in front of them, and that had fostered and engendered a code of practice and a code of honour. But surely there are still people of conviction who are prepared to tell the truth and stand by it.
Yeah, there are, but the other elements of today. I mean, Polly made the point about the sort of left-right divides become rather more blurred. A lot of politics is more focus group led now, and is more polling. I mean, this government spends more money on polling and focus groups than any government in history. You know. I mean, I don't think government should be allowed to do that, in truth. But, you know, so you've got that drives people as well. I mean, that tends to go back to the Clinton-Blair years, where they suddenly discovered what they thought was political science. So somehow that you could distill wisdom from a focus group or an opinion poll. You can't. What people think today is not what they're going to think in 2 years' time. Their judgment of your policy now is going to be different to when its results come out. So there's an exquisite short-termism in politics arising from that, and also arising from Twitter, social media, all of that, which makes reactions that much faster. And people, you know, politicians are human beings. They learn from their environment. If they learn they've got to go with this flow or go with that flow, or maybe just avoid the mob altogether, that also affects their behaviour. So lots of reasons, I'm afraid, to erode it. That being said, you know, I think whoever follows this generation, there's probably going to be a big premium on people who are trustworthy, people who have...
Is that such a big ask?
It's not such a big ask, but it's quite hard to deliver, I think, you know, in the modern era. But, you know, I actually think, you know, the great thing... You talk about democracy's edge or advantage, yeah? I think democracy's edge is it adjusts. You know, the totalitarian states don't adjust. Democracy adjusts. We will adjust, and we will get trust back.
I have to leave that thought there. It's fascinating insights on two fascinating subjects. The slavery, a story I could talk to you endlessly about, but thank you also for those insights there about the situation in which we find ourselves. After the break, I'll be speaking to the paleontologist who accidentally discovered Britain's largest ever, almost complete, marine fossil.
On Mark Dolan tonight, my Mark Meets guest is a man who's written lyrics for scores of Elton John songs. Best-selling composer Gary Osborne is live at 10. In The Big Question, has Australia lost the plot? We'll speak to two journalists down under. US showbiz news with reporter Kinsey Schofield live from Hollywood, plus my all-star panel, including radio legend Mike Parry. And in my big opinion, China's getting too close for comfort. See you at 9.
Hello there, I'm Eamon.
And I'm Isabel.
And you're watching the GB News digital stream across the United Kingdom.
And around the world.
If you're here in the UK, you can also watch us on your TV screen. GB News is Freeview Channel 236.
On Sky, we're Channel 515.
626 on Virgin Media.
Just remember, you might need to retune your TV to watch the channel.
Yeah, and if you are doing that, find out more about retuning by going to gbnews.uk.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilized conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon.
And Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
Hello again. An unlikely discovery in the bed of a reservoir in Rutland in the East Midlands has been described as one of the greatest finds in British paleontological history. The fossilised remains of a huge marine predator called an Ichthyosaur came to light in February last year during landscaping work on the reservoir. Now paleontologists have called the find an almost complete 30-foot long specimen, totally unprecedented. Joining me to relive the moment is Joe Davis, whose discovery it was. Hello, Joe, are you there?
I'm there. I'm here even.
How are you?
I'm very good, thank you.
Good, thank you.
Nice to join you.
Now, tell us how this happened, how you came across. I mean, when people see the size of it, I suppose, to say you tripped over it, but what happened? What was the sequence of events?
Yeah, so I work at Rutland Water Nature Reserve. It's a part of Rutland Water, which is a really big. Well, it's the biggest reservoir in England, and I work for the Wildlife Trust, and we're always looking to make improvements to the habitats for the birds there. And on this particular lagoon, which was constructed about 12 years ago, we were going to do some re-landscape of the islands to improve them. A colleague and I, Paul Trevor, were walking across with our laser levels over our shoulders, about to do some work, some levelling, and I looked down and saw a ridge of just unusual stones, I guess, in the ground, or sticking out in the mud. And yeah, I took a double look at it and a glance, and I could see some sort of organic elements to it, almost like vertebrae, and yeah, basically, I realised I had to get some specialist help with this. So we took photographs, sent them off to, via Rutland County Council, who were really, really helpful, to the archaeology department there. And they sent it off to Dean Lomax, and basically he came back. And also a guy called Mark Evans, who they came out and had a look, and we were astonished by what they found. So we had about 8 or 10 vertebrae just sticking out the mud, and they came in February and just did a small dig and realised that what they got is a virtually fully articulated skeleton. So this thing was in the Jurassic clays, and so it was sticking out. But we realised we couldn't carry on with the dig. It was very icy. It was very tricky conditions. So, they came back later in the summer.
And I understand, I mean, to give people, as if the pictures weren't enough, I find the pictures look like a special effect from a film. I can't believe they're real. But to get an even clearer understanding of scale, understand the head section, when it was being moved, it weighed around a ton all on its own. Once it was
That's correct, yeah.
How was it moved?
Yeah, so the head is about 6.5 foot long, so it's bigger than me. What they did is they dug around it and left it on these plinths, and then put a frame around it and covered it in plaster cast to secure it. And then we lifted it with a telehandler. So we had a big telehandler, put the arm over the top of it and very gently lift it and took it away. So the next step is to look at that in detail and see what science and what we can find out within the muds around it. This animal's, as you say, is 10.5 meters long. It's phenomenal.
Is it just the bone, the skeleton that has been fossilized, or is there any other element of the body preserved?
Yeah. That is what we don't know. So at the moment, it's in its casing. So we need to raise money to do the rest of the research on it. So Anglian Water and the council are looking to get lottery funding so the paleontologists can really get in there and see, because it may be a female and it might have embryos. We may be able to find out what it ate as well. So there might be food preserved in there. So I think the beast has got an awful lot more to tell us.
Now, what was an ichthyosaur? Is there a modern equivalent, that people might picture to get a sense of what that creature actually was and how it lived?
So it was a marine reptile. I guess the closest you can say is like a massive dolphin, but with a shark's tail. So that's very similar. It's a small model, but that's the sort of animal it was. And this had a huge jaw. It was the apex predator at its time. So this was the biggest fish, probably on land or in the water at that time in the Jurassic period. So it's the apex predator, and it was the biggest eye of any species ever known as well for its size. So it was diving into the depths of the Jurassic seas, catching anything because it was at the top of the food chain.
Absolutely wonderful stuff, Joe. Thank you. 1,000 thanks for joining us and bringing that to us. I could talk to you about that, as with so many stories. I could talk to you about that for the rest of the show. But I have to move on. So best of luck with the ongoing research into that. What an adventure to be involved in the analysis of such a creature. But Polly, what do you make when you see something brought back to us from, maybe 200 million years ago?
It's so hard to imagine the scale of something that large. I thought the picture of the person lying down next to the skeleton really helps. You just think. That world, those hundreds of millions of years ago, where everything was at just this extraordinary scale. There's something about that, just a world, on Zoom, which is just really, really hard to get your head around. There was that the Netflix show about film, the Dig, about the digging up of the kind of the Saxon
of Sutton Hoo.
Sutton, yeah, and so there's also something about that idea. Or even, I don't know, the Detectorists, the BBC kind of very gentle, lovely sitcom. That sense of this just, ordinary people stumbling across something truly extraordinary.
Tom, I don't know about you, but when I watch something like that, and it happens to me all the time, I think if I had my time again, I'd be a dinosaur hunter. It lights fires in my brain.
It does, as you say. It's just mind-boggling as well, the amount of years we're talking about. 180 million years ago. Sutton Hoo, obviously a great ancient historic find, but it's the equivalent of yesterday in time terms, isn't it, to that? And the picture there just shows a man or indeed a woman could fit just within the mouth of that great beast.
The world that we're used to and populated as it is by wonderful creatures, blue whales, the lions and the tigers of the African plains and all the rest of it. But to be reminded that that's just the latest list of inhabitants of the planet. And as you go back through unimaginable depth of time, a whole other congregation of creatures, again and again and again, 90% of everything that's ever lived is extinct. It's just, you know, that variety that this planet has brought forth and conjured into being is just the stuff of wonder.
It does make you wonder, I mean, given that the ancient county of Rutland, of course, is now extinct, whether they'll choose the Rutland sea dragon as their new emblem on the coat of arms. We'll have to see. It's a great find, though, isn't it?
It is, and there's a great richness in the. I remember reading that fossilization is so unlikely. You know, many things we don't know that they existed at all because nothing of them was ever fossilized. If the population of the United States of America, 300 million people, was to die in the same moment, statistically you'd expect 1/4 of one of their bodies to survive as a fossil. Wow. I mean, it's so breathtakingly unlikely.
Which again, for me, the real spirit of this is in that idea of finding it, of being that guy who trips over a vertebra in the mud, you know, is because they're so unlikely.
Yes.
And all of, you know, our planet's history and that just extraordinary luck.
It's the great. We were talking about the slave trade. You know, a dark period in history, and then the dismantling of it. And then when you look at something like, you know, the Jurassic period and the world of geology, I find a great comfort in momentarily getting away from our travails of today, and remembering or being reminded about that unimaginable sweep of history, and that everything that we care about is just, you know, on the surface of an impossible deep ocean of time.
There's a passage by Carl Sagan, the astronomer. I was about to say astrologer.
Cosmologist, I think.
Cosmologist, yeah, exactly. But about that first shot of what he described as the pale blue dot from a distance. And it's the same, it's the temporal version of that, of recognising that every joy and every sorrow is transitory and microscopically small in comparison to the temporal and the size scale of the universe we're so privileged to inhabit.
Yep. Now, after the break, I'll be joined by a life coach who can tell us how to keep sticking to those New Year resolutions that, let's face it, so many of us make and so few of us manage to keep. All of that.
Hello there, I'm Eamon.
And I'm Isabel.
And you're watching the GB News digital stream across the United Kingdom.
And around the world.
If you're here in the UK, you can also watch us on your TV screen. GB News is Freeview Channel 236.
On Sky, we're Channel 515.
626 on Virgin Media.
Just remember, you might need to retune your TV to watch the channel.
Yeah, and if you are doing that, find out more about retuning by going to gbnews.uk.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilized conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
Welcome back. The start of the new year is a time when many of us take a good, long, hard look at ourselves, Traditionally, of course, it's a time for resolutions and promising ourselves and others that we will make changes for the better. All too often, though, those best-laid plans that we embark upon in January are set aside by February as we lapse into our old ways. My next guest, Wendy Chipiso Maladou, is a life coach dedicated to the idea that each of us has inner greatness just waiting to be tapped. She seems like the perfect person to talk to about why so many New Year's resolutions are abandoned, and more importantly, what strategies we might better employ so as to stick to some of them. She's with me now. Hello, Wendy.
Good evening, Neil, and good evening to all your viewers at home.
Oh, lovely. Thank you for that. Now, I've obviously got to ask you, did you make any New Year's resolutions, and are you sticking to them?
Right, so I think let's start by acknowledging that, as you've already said, that the new year gives us an opportunity to start all over again. And I guess it's human nature when we're given an opportunity to start all over again, given a new slate, we actually aspire to actually start things all over again. And actually, just while we're on that note, when we actually set New Year's resolutions, or I'll call them goals, and I'll explain later on why we do that, is that by human nature, we're actually utilizing a very powerful concept in psychology called self-efficacy. So when people actually aspire to goals and follow through with them, it gives them the sense of control. So I guess that's why, to start with, people actually set the New Year's resolutions. But I guess what I'm here to talk about is that we need to turn those New Year's resolutions into goals. So I have definitely set goals for myself, Daniel, for the year.
Is it a good idea, do you think, that we have this essentially arbitrary date in the calendar when we're all encouraged to think about setting new goals and new objectives? Might it be better if each of us found our own moments in the course of the year to set dates? Or is it a good idea to have that 1st of January, new year, new slate, and set goals then? What's the better strategy?
So, truth be told, I guess every new day gives us an opportunity to actually, plan for the day and actually choose and make the choices that we want to do for our day. So whether it's a new year or whether it's a new day, every new day is a gift. And so it's how do we use that day and maximize it? So I think the new year, the good thing about it is just it feels like everything is new, as I've alluded to. So people maximize that opportunity. So for me, whether you do it every day or where you come up with those aspirational goals, I guess the sense of human behavior. Let me also clarify that I'm a senior behavioral scientist with Coach Hub. I think the sense of it from science and from human behavior, we actually realize that people want something to look forward to, something that gives them hope. They feel like they're aspiring for something. And that's why people set goals in general. And whether they do it on a day-to-day basis or they do it at the beginning of the year, I don't think it's really when they do it, it's actually the importance of creating that sense of hope and having something to aspire for and to find meaning and purpose in our lives.
I hear you loud and clear, the importance of hope, the importance of goals. But why then, in your opinion, your expert opinion, do so many New Year's resolutions fall by the way? Why aren't we better? Given that it's such a positive objective, why aren't we better at sticking to them?
Yeah, so this is where I say, Neil, there's a difference between making a wish and setting a goal. So most of us, we make wishes. Oh, I wish I'm going to lose weight. Oh, I wish I'm going to get a new job. And so when we make wishes, there's no structure to those wishes. And also there's no sense of commitment when we just make a list of wishes. But we need to first turn those wishes into goals. Goal setting theory tells us that when there's that sense of structure or a model called SMART goals, so you turn those goals into SMART goals. And SMART is an acronym that stands for specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and time-bound. So your goals must be SMART. So as it's not just a wish. There's a difference when you say, I want to lose weight, and the difference when you say, I want to lose X amount of weight by June 2022 by going to the gym twice a week, drinking 8 glasses of water, you know, so that already indicates a sense of structure on how you're going to achieve that goal. But if you're just putting down a list, oh, I just want to stop doing this, you know, then it's just a wish list. There's no sense of goal setting to it. And it's more likely to dwindle away by the 1st of February because there's no sense of commitment to what you've actually put down.
Wendy, you radiate positivity. I think if I had you as my life coach, I would be better at remaining focused on my objectives. So many thanks for joining us and imparting the fruits of your wisdom there. Many thanks. Tom, are you a maker and keeper of resolutions?
Not of New Year's resolutions anymore, apart from the fact of doing Dry January. I think Polly's doing that as well, although I think you're going to be tempting us out of that at the end of the show.
Yes.
Potentially. But what really struck a chord with me there was the fact that actually, wishes are different from goals. And I do think, now I've sort of turned my 50th year and, I run an organisation and I have to motivate myself and indeed, the team that I work with. I do think just, setting those incremental goals that are measurable, that are tangible is really important, because I think when people see that, when you see that and people around you see that, then that's what spurs you on then to go a little bit further. So I think back to 2 years ago when I started my podcast, it was a very amateur thing in audio. Now it's sort of full video and it's on the streaming sites and got thousands of subscribers. So, but going back to that journey, it was a part of, this would be fun to do this. It's a way of reaching new audiences. And then you get a really positive response, and that really spurs you on to then go to the next level. And I think that's how people want to operate. I think they just want that positive feedback that then leads you on to the next step, as opposed to these crash and burn diets, or I'm going to join the gym and go 6 days a week and be on the treadmill for a whole hour. People who go down that route will inevitably, I think as the life coach says there, come 1st of February, they'll be on their back.
Polly, so many people live very, very busy lives with things that they have to achieve every day, and day after day. Do you think there's a merit in addition to all of that, heaping upon ourselves yet more personal resolutions? And more to the point, do you follow that philosophy?
I'm definitely a great lover of, the new notebook.
You're a maker of lists.
Just that sense of that clean piece of paper, that this one is going to be tidy. It never is. So I do kind of set myself goals to get better at things, and lots of them fall by the wayside. But I think that's part of the journey of life, actually, is to be striving and learning and challenging yourself, and also letting yourself off the hook when it doesn't kind of turn out the right way.
I think that's right. I think absolutely it is absolutely right to have goals, but because we're human and we miss goals and we miss targets, I think it's counterproductive if you then just beat yourself up for the things you haven't done. I think you've just got to keep on moving positively forward. So here we are, we've crossed over, not a new year, a new hour. Plenty more coming up on Neil Oliver Live, but it's the back of 8 o'clock now. Let's get the latest news headlines from Simon.
Thanks, Neil. Yes, I'm Simon Pusey from the GB Newsroom. The Prime Minister is facing mounting pressure to resign from opposition leaders, but also from MPs within his own party. It follows a series of allegations that parties, including regular Wine Fridays, took place at Number 10 whilst COVID restrictions were in place. Former Tory Minister Tobias Ellwood says the Prime Minister must lead or step aside, but Sir Keir Starmer says it's in the national interest for the Conservative Party to get rid of Boris Johnson.
Moral authority matters in relation to enforcing the COVID rules, but we've got other massive challenges facing this country, massive challenges. We've got a Prime Minister who is absent, he's literally in hiding at the moment, and unable to lead. And so that's why I've concluded that he's got to go. And of course there's a party advantage in him going, but actually it's now in the national interest that he goes. So it's very important now that the Tory party does what it needs to do and gets rid of him.
An underwater volcano that erupted in Tonga has triggered tsunami warnings in Japan, Hawaii and the North American west coast. Japan's Met Office has issued evacuation orders with waves as high as 3 meters expected in the South Pacific Islands. They've urged people not to go near the sea until the warnings have been lifted. No damage or casualties have as yet been reported. The Foreign Secretary has called for Moscow to halt its aggression amid fears of an invasion on Ukraine. In a tweet, Liz Truss says Russia is waging a disinformation campaign intended to destabilise Ukraine and therefore justify an invasion. She's urging President Vladimir Putin to de-escalate the situation after more than 100,000 Russian troops were posted along the Ukraine border. Meanwhile, the chair of the Defence Select Committee is warning Russia will likely play with the gas price if Western powers impose sanctions in the wake of those Ukraine tensions. In an exclusive interview with GBNews, Tobias Ellwood said further sanctions would likely cause the Russian president to restrict the amount of gas his country exports, causing price rises in Britain. In the UK, the energy price cap is due to be reviewed and could already increase by as much as 50% due to limited supply. Well, in the next few hours, Novak Djokovic is expected to hear the verdict of his visa appeal hearing. The tennis star is currently in detention at a hotel in Melbourne ahead of the decision. His legal team have said they'll argue the decision to deny him entry is irrational. His exemption from vaccine requirements to play in the Aussie Open has prompted widespread anger in the country. TV, online and DAB+ radio. This is GB News. Now it's back to Neil Oliver Live.
Thank you, Simon. Welcome back. You're with Neil Oliver on GB News and on digital radio. Now, many people make January, or rather, and you know, I'm not even sure how you properly pronounce this word, veganuary, a month for swapping meat for a vegetable-based diet. Some do it for health reasons, and others out of concerns for animal welfare, or indeed the future of the planet, or perhaps a mix of all three. It may come as more of a surprise to learn that dog owners are allegedly increasingly curious about the possibility of seeing man's best friend make the change to vegan dogs. Can it be true? More to the point, can it ever be good for them? Here to talk it all through is vet and co-founder of a plant-based dog food company, Guy Sandalovsky. Hello, Guy.
Hi, Neil. Thanks for having me on.
Oh, no, it's a pleasure. And once again, a fascinating topic. Veganism is obviously, and has for a long time, been a choice for human beings. And around the world, a vegan diet has been par for the course for, you know, millennia. But is it fair to do this to dogs who, when I last checked, I thought were carnivores?
Yeah, a lot of people think that dogs are carnivores, but what the science has proven now is that dogs are actually omnivores. So like us, they're able to digest and absorb nutrients from plant-based foods too. So when you consider that they can derive the nutrients they need from plant-based sources, it becomes more about whether we can actually, you know, offer dogs food that they love as much as they do meat. And what we're really excited about with our product, which we've created after about a year of research, is that when you give dogs meat-based dog food and you give them our food, a lot of those dogs are actually choosing our food over the meat-based option.
But I hear what you're saying, but just because hypothetically or in practice you can switch your dog to a vegan diet, should a dog owner do that? I mean, how can you tell? Obviously, a dog will eat to survive, and we've all seen the kind of things that dogs will eat, you know, willingly while out on their walks. But is it in the dog's psychological and physiological best interests to go against thousands of years of evolution and give up meat?
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting question. And I think when we look at dogs, there's definitely a nostalgia for thinking of them as kind of wild wolves hunting to survive, you know, and eating meat. But actually, the domesticated dog is quite different to that. You know, you only have to look at lots of the popular dog breeds in the UK, and they don't really look like that wild wolf hunting in the wild. And at the end of the day, if you go back to the basics and you just appreciate the fact that dogs need a certain amount of protein, they need a certain amount of fat, they need quite a complex variety of vitamins and minerals. As long as you're giving dogs that, and in some cases, if you're actually giving that instead of kind of processed meat, which is incredibly common in dog food in the UK, and we know that processed meat causes cancer in humans and is linked to obesity, two problems we see a lot of in the clinic in dogs. Actually, maybe it is a good thing. Maybe it is actually a health benefit to start thinking about using cleaner plant-based ingredients. And the other side of it is, the sustainability of the meat industry. And we know we're in a kind of climate emergency. I'm not an ecologist, but we know that by cutting back on the amount of meat we consume, we're actually also cutting back on our carbon footprint. And so if we can offer dogs food that's healthy, that's better for the planet, and that they love, then from my perspective, it's really a win-win.
Do you yourself have a primarily plant-based diet?
Yeah, so I'm vegan. I don't eat meat, and I've been vegan a while. And all I can say is, since I stopped eating meat, I feel buckets healthier. I've got more energy. I feel great about the fact as well that I, don't have to eat other animals. I became a vet to help animals, and there was always this kind of weird contradiction in my mind that on the one hand, you're in the clinic, helping pets to live healthier lives. The other hand, you're eating them. And that always felt like a bit of a contradiction to me. So I feel great about the fact that I can get all the nutrients I need. And I'm an active person. I go to the gym, I play lots of sports, and I don't miss meat. And I also have a black Labrador who's 13, who's also vegan. And he's thriving. He's doing so well. And he sadly got mouth cancer when he was 4. And it really got me thinking about, of course, cancer is caused by many things, but it really just got me thinking, what's going on? What are we actually feeding our dogs? Because we know in humans, we have to be so careful about what we eat, but it just feels like in the dog food world, in the pet space, actually things haven't changed very much in terms of commercial dog food. And I think it's a good time to start reassessing that and thinking how we can do things better.
I understand, and I'm sympathetic to what you're saying, especially given your beliefs, as a vet, and the relationship that you have with animals and the responsibility you feel for them. When I've looked at plant-based offerings, in the supermarket, I'm quite often struck in terms of the ingredients with the extent to which they do look like lists from a chemical textbook. That they themselves, certainly the plant-based offerings for human beings look pretty processed to me. But it sounds as though you're saying that there are plant-based offerings for dogs that are better than that. Is that the case? More natural,
yeah,
so to speak.
When we created Omni, we really made a point to try and make this product super clean label. So if you look at the back of the bag, you're only going to see things in there that you would eat yourself. We use sweet potatoes, pumpkins, brown rice, lentils, blueberries, and we don't have a list of E-numbers or ingredients that you don't recognize. And okay, the shelf life of our products maybe isn't as long as some of the other competitor products, which can be tricky for us as a business. But we actually think we'd rather, not keep something on the shelf for 2-3 years and keep it on the shelf for a shorter period, but actually avoid some of these kind of harmful chemicals that we put in dog food to make it taste better, to make it last longer. And it is possible to be clean label and not to use, the ingredients that you're talking about. It's absolutely possible. And I actually think that's why dogs love our food so much, because it's just very wholesome.
Many thanks for that, Guy Sandalovsky. That's a fascinating concept. I'm open-minded about it. I'm going to thank you for that and put this across to my panel to see what we make of it, but thank you for now. Tom, what do you think? Vegan dogs? Instant reaction.
I just feel like it's somebody who, believes in veganism is imposing their ideological viewpoint on their animal, on their pet. So I'm not a fan, I'm afraid.
Okay. Polly, what do you reckon?
I'm really fascinated by the evidence and the research. It's clear that in the wild, a dog cannot boil some rice or even for that matter, a lentil. But, you know, domesticated pets aren't in the wild, and actually, so long as you are exploring the evidence about what these pets nutritionally need, I think, you know, it's worth you know, conducting experiments, trying to make sure that there's more choice in the marketplace. I think, you know, it doesn't make sense for me as a moral crusade if you are to protect, you know, one set of farm animals and cause harm to domestic pets by taking essential nutrients out of their diet. But nevertheless, if, you know, it's for me, it's all about the science. I'm also really interested in, there's also, maybe you could do it next time, insect-based pet food. So our cat often eats insect-based pet food, which is now another source of protein, which is much more environmentally friendly. And you can just mix it in with the more traditional stuff instead of having to go like all the way.
I just feel that we have a very strange relationship with food now. And I'm listening very carefully to what Guy was saying about processed food. You know, I would far rather, to be honest, eat as close to the natural product that's vegetables than I would eat some of the highly processed ready meals that so many people have become accustomed to. You know, I'm much more interested in eating, you know, meat that's had a decent life, that's been grown locally, has been treated with utmost respect and kindness until the stipulated end of its life. You know, so I think we have a strange relationship. It's not enough, and I think it's not enough just to be vegan or a meat eater. I think you've got to be responsible and thoughtful with whichever way that you go with it. But yes, food for thought, so to speak. After the break, we'll be looking to Sheffield, where our reporter Anna Riley has been considering how local miners' clubs have been surviving after COVID.
On Mark Dolan tonight, my Mark Meets guest is a man who's written lyrics for scores of Elton John songs. Best-selling composer Gary Osborne is live at 10. In the big question, has Australia lost the plot? We'll speak to two journalists down under. US showbiz news with reporter Kinsey Schofield live from Hollywood, plus my all-star panel, including radio legend Mike Parry. And in my big opinion, China's getting too close for comfort. See you at 9.
Hello there, I'm Eamon.
And I'm Isabel.
And you're watching the GB News digital stream across the United Kingdom.
And around the world. If
you're here in the UK, you can also watch us on your TV screen. GB News is Freeview channel 236.
On Sky, we're channel 515.
626 on Virgin Media.
Just remember, you might need to retune your TV to watch the channel.
Yeah, and if you are doing that, find out more about retuning by going to gbnews.uk.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilized conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
Hello and welcome back. Thank you for staying with me. You're with Neil Oliver on GB News and on digital radio. Now, I've just, as I said at the top of the show, social media, interested in your comments. I've literally in the break just been handed some that I honestly haven't read, so I'm going straight in here kind of blind. JC on Twitter, bloody hell, the Coast guy has just made me cry again. I'm hoping that's just a reference to my monologue and not my general appearance. Sharon Hudson, visiting in some hospitals and care homes is still being restricted. Please highlight this. Peter says, trust is like virginity. Once it's lost, it's gone forever. I'm Arnie tweeted, wake me up when Neil Oliver has finished. Fair comment, fair comment. And Sean Mukherjee said, hello, Neil, Polly and Tom. I'm listening attentively. Good points and deep discussion tonight. You see, you get it all here on Neil Oliver Live. For decades, don't laugh, for decades coal mining has been the backbone of the economy, stimulating regions across the UK by employing hundreds, thousands of people. But the closure of collieries from the 1970s onwards meant that the industry collapsed, leading to the closure of Britain's last deep coal mine, North Yorkshire's Kellingley Colliery, in December 2015. The government is now ramping up plans for all coal-fired power stations to shut down by 2025. Some of the vast pit sites in South Yorkshire's towns and villages have been reclaimed as parks, lakes and wildlife reserves. The casual observer could be forgiven for thinking the industry had never existed there. But with multiple mining clubs in these areas forced to close due to a lack of funding and customers, what has become of those that have managed to survive and to thrive? Our reporter Anna Riley visited a mining club near Sheffield to find out the key to their success.
Miners' welfare clubs were at the beating heart of industrial communities in Britain, built as places for workers to relax and unwind, with facilities that allowed for education, arts and entertainment, as well as a bar, of course. But as the coalfields closed in the UK, many of the clubs also passed into the mists of time. In recent years, coupled with the financial burdens of COVID, these hubs that were once bastions of the community have been forced into permanent closure. This hasn't been the case for Renishaw Miners' Welfare Social Club in Sheffield, though, which has remained a thriving modern embodiment of community spirit, which miners' welfare clubs were built to create. It now has around 1,000 yearly paying members, and profits are on the rise.
I do often laugh to myself and come in the club and think, are we like Phoenix Nights here? But do you know something? It's more than that. It is everybody knowing each other, everybody checking up on each other, everybody making sure everybody's all right. And then there's special moments in people's lives, christenings, weddings. We celebrate them and we celebrate them together. And that we like to get the community to stick together. So, yeah, all right, might be a bit corny, might be a bit of a cliche, but do you know something? This club is the glue of this village. Absolutely.
For the staff working here, there could be no better job.
Good banter with everybody. You get a few odd people who are a bit, well, moaners, but they're mainly the older end. But no, it's a good banter and everybody knows each other, you know what I mean? We all like work together. Bar staff's brilliant, all afternoon, and customers just love coming here.
To the members, the club is much more than just a place to drink. It's a hive of charitable gestures and community support.
Everybody tries to help one another, and it's just that comradeship that really it's like just binds everybody together.
I enjoy it. I really enjoy it coming. Gets you out of house.
I wouldn't like to see it shut, put it that way. Hope to see my life out on it. And I'm 84.
So even though the industry is long gone here, it seems that this miners' club is here to stay. Anna Riley, GB News, Sheffield.
Before we go any further with what we have planned for this evening, there's some breaking news and I have to hand over now to Simon with the latest details.
Thank you very much, Neil. Yes, some news just in is that police in Texas are involved in a standoff at a synagogue where a man has taken people hostage. Multiple people apparently being held at gunpoint at Congregation Beth Israel Synagogue in Colleyville. That's according to local media. The suspect is reportedly demanding the release of a relative in prison. Colleyville police have announced on Twitter all residents in the immediate area are being evacuated. We will, of course, bring you the latest news on that as we get it. Now let's hand you back to Neil Oliver.
Thank you for that, Simon. That's potentially upsetting news that will stay across as it unfolds. To change the subject not a little bit, weeks and then months of lockdown left a lot of people with time on their hands. Earlier this evening, I had planned that we would have been talking to an octogenarian, Don Morton, who was to be our Great Britain, and he used the lockdown to take up skateboarding at the age of 82. But for one reason and another, we'll be joining him in another week ahead. Now, though, allow me to introduce you to Grimsby man Paul Everett, who saw an opportunity to build an infinity pool for squirrels. I kid you not. Paul was in the process of doing up his house when he noticed the wildlife in his garden, including hedgehogs, pigeons, foxes, and the aforementioned squirrels. While some people might have sought to chase the critters away, Paul decided to build them a whole world of their own. I'm pleased to say that Paul joins me now. Paul, have you gone stark staring mad, or is there some method in your madness? Talk me through your thought process.
It's just to fill that void, basically. There's been a lot of downtime, as obviously you know, with people. So yeah, it was just something to do, and like I say, almost clear the mind of be a distraction. It started off with just a small structure, and then it kind of escalated. It had a slide then added to it. From there was a bridge up to the Swingers Club, which had several swings on there, and that's where the infinity pool is also located. And all of a sudden the squirrels just kept coming one after another. There's at least 7 I know of that I've seen at one time. You've got Terry, Compost, Shorttail. They're the only ones I kind of really know. But yeah, it's just a little sanctuary, really.
And I teed it up by mentioning an infinity pool. What on earth does an infinity pool for squirrels look like or amount to?
I had some Perspex. I had some Perspex sheets left, and I just made a swimming pool and glued it together, put it on the main tower. But it was kind of a place really for the animals to come and drink from. The pigeons use it to bathe in. The squirrels do. I've seen a squirrel in there once or twice. So yeah, it's just a place really. It's a little hub for them to just kind of relax, eat, enjoy, and it gives me that moment to just stop and appreciate actually my back garden more than anything.
Are you and have you been a lifelong lover of animals? Is this an extension of an interest in your fellow travellers that you brought with you from childhood, maybe?
Yeah, I've always loved animals. Hedgehogs were my favourite growing up. Crikey, I used to have several hedgehog teddies, but yeah, I mean, the last few years I've been living in Canada, so I've been very lucky to be around grizzly bears, black bears, wolves. Several wolves I've had within feet of me. So wildlife's a big part of my life. I kind of like animals more than people, if you don't mind me saying. You know, there's a bit more trust, and I just feel really relaxed around them. So yeah, it's just a really nice way to escape kind of the reality of Grimsby at the minute.
Do you think it's so often the case that the built environment we chase animals away deliberately or as collateral damage? Do you think it's important? I mean, this is very much light-hearted what you've been doing there, but do you think it matters to make accommodation for and to accept that the animals were there first and that they continue to be entitled to space in our world?
Yeah, I mean, they're always going to be around, aren't they? At the end of the day, you're never going to chase them away. a lot of people do battle against the squirrels to kind of push them away from the bird feeders. But if you're feeding birds, why not feed squirrels? They're all going to, it's just, we're all going to enjoy each other's company and just get on with it, and the squirrels are very clever. You can't not build something for them not to get into to eat. So just let them be, and just sit back and enjoy them. There's very few things in life, I guess, that you can just appreciate like that. And I've got a TV, so my TV is my window, my garden, and so it's just simple joy, isn't it? They're all harmless. The birds, the foxes, which are actually outside right now. It's just pure joy in my eyes, to be honest.
Bear with me, Paul, while I broaden this discussion out to take in my panel guests, Tom and Polly. Tom, it's very much it's a light-hearted story, but it is important, I think, to acknowledge the place that our wildlife has.
Yeah.
And I think, and it does do something positive for the human spirit, I think, to make space.
It really does, and I think actually the reality of lockdown 1 for families that were fortunate enough to have gardens, and it was quiet on the streets. I remember being outside with my kids and actually acknowledging and interacting with nature in a way that I hadn't done previously. Yes, I was aware there were squirrels in the garden, there were pigeons and birds that were landing on our trestle table. Again, the squirrels and the birds fighting for the food that we were giving them. But there is something as well, I think, about what happened during the lockdown when suddenly you could hear the wildlife, you could hear the birds in the trees in ways that previously perhaps you weren't. So it's it's a fascinating story.
Polly, it is. I think it is an insight. I think Paul mentioned there, alluded to the possibility that maybe things haven't been particularly bright in Grimsby, but that would be the case all over. I think it is indicative, isn't it, of just how long this hiatus has gone on in our lives.
Yeah, and I think it's been incredibly difficult, and I have felt so privileged to have, even quite a small London garden, and just beyond my garden wall, a mother fox raised a litter of foxes, but it was amazing to watch them kind of gambling about in the spring sunshine, almost as sort of charming as lambs. And I think it's something that everybody can and should make time for, whether it is in a park, whether it is in your garden if you've got one, because there's huge amounts of evidence that engaging with nature and with wildlife in just that way just pays huge dividends for your mental health, and it's absolutely worth doing. It's how lots of people have got by, and it's worth those who haven't made the time for that, I think, really pushing themselves, because I really do think that you will feel the benefit.
Paul, back to you. The lightheartedness of it notwithstanding, was it important? Was it and has it been part of a process for you of getting through the last couple of years of strangeness and oftentimes anxiety?
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, for many years I've struggled pre-COVID with. I mean, if you want to go down the mental health side of things, suicide. Several kind of parts of my life, but animal and nature has took me away from that, and it is important, and I wouldn't change for anything, and I miss I think I miss Canada, I miss that vast wilderness, but my garden's this nice little sanctuary. You've got the foxes, the squirrels, the birds, and it just cleans the mind when you just sit there, escape TV, escape your phone, and just sit and appreciate what you've got around you.
It is true, isn't it, Polly, that this last 2 years, it's not as though people's lives weren't often difficult anyway for all manner of reasons, financial and so many other factors, but these 2 years have undoubtedly taken a dreadful toll.
There's no question that there will be a kind of huge mental health consequence for the whole population from this. We know people with severe mental illness were often excluded from networks of support, excluded from care services who used to visit them, who then didn't. And then people with kind of mild to moderate mental illness often found that just being stuck in quite repetitive environments, again, away from patterns of getting out and about, which have hurt them. And then we've got the backlog in the NHS for both groups of people to achieve treatment. I've seen one estimate by the Centre for Mental Health that suggests we need to spend another 32 billion on mental health services just to catch up with unmet need, which kind of everyone knows isn't going to happen. So I think we need to focus on that kind of preventative, self-healing type approaches. And, pets, wildlife, I think it's because it's that mindfulness thing. When you are engaging with a squirrel in that moment, that beautiful picture, you are in the moment. The thoughts about the week or the year or the lifetime just slip away and you can appreciate the immediate. And that is, again, really clear evidence in terms of mental health, that mindfulness, that ability to be in the moment is what keeps us healthy.
I think, Tom, for me, what I've been aware of, a lot of people have been in touch with me over the months. I've had a lot of letters sent to me, expressing all kinds of emotion and all kinds of concern. And it's been very important to me to seek where possible to reassure those that feel, if they felt isolated and alone, that they're not. That although they might be experiencing something on their own, they are part of a community of isolated people who have been going through something, very challenging. And I think it's so important to let people know that in so many ways that they are not, and they've not been alone. They may have felt it, but their experience is shared.
Yeah, absolutely. Which is why I think going forwards with the inquiry that will happen as a result of the pandemic, that we have an honest conversation as a nation as to when lockdowns are really necessary. I think when the virus was novel and new and we needed to flatten the curve and we didn't really know what was coming out of Wuhan and the way it hit northern Italy and swept across the continent, people like me were understanding and saying, yes, perhaps this is a necessary foregoing of our ancient liberties in order to deal with this once-in-a-century pandemic. But I think 2 years on, and you're seeing the impact, for example, of the lost learning in our schools, the impact on children, on their mental health. I've seen the impact on my own children. I think we've got to, as a nation, have a debate about whether lockdown really is the way forward for dealing with what is a genuine public health challenge. And it's just great as ever, in the British psyche to see people like Paul who have faced an adversity and gone out there and built a fantastic habitat for our wildlife.
Paul, what's next? How can you develop and broaden out your wildlife world?
I'm not too sure. I mean, I build a lot of bird boxes and give them away, so I'll just carry on doing that for a little bit in between work and my other projects I've got going. But I don't know. I'll just keep adding to it. I'm sure there's something I can come up with in the next few weeks.
More power to you, Paul, and I hope it continues to bring you comfort and inspiration and relaxation. Thanks for joining us tonight. After the break, another one's upon us now. It's I'm being informed, gin o'clock, and I will see you there.
Hello there, I'm Eamon.
And I'm Isabel.
And you're watching the GB News digital stream across the United Kingdom.
And around the world.
If you're here in the UK, you can also watch us on your TV screen. GB News is Freeview Channel 236.
On Sky, we're Channel 515.
626 on Virgin Media.
Just remember, you might need to retune your TV to watch the channel.
Yeah, and if you are doing that, find out more about retuning by going to gbnews.uk.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilized conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Dan Wootton, join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
Welcome back. Look, I'm in a completely different part of the studio. I have never been here before. It's like they opened a door and I've walked through into a kind of studio Narnia. So we'll see what happens. I will admit I had heard of veganuary. How do you pronounce that? What do you say?
I think it's veganuary. Like
veganuary.
January, you know.
Doesn't sound like a real word to me. However...
It's not.
It's not. But this month is also apparently Ginuary. You see what we did there? Some 5 million Britons are now, according to research, regular drinkers of gin. Increasingly, it seems beer and wine are being challenged for dominance, not in my house, by a rise in interest in cocktails like martinis, Negronis, is that right? Negroni? Yeah. Negroni. You see, I don't know where I am with this stuff. And a Long Island iced tea. I have vague memories of Long Island iced tea in another life. The common denominator in all of those and more is gin. Joining us now to refresh our palates with the spirit of the moment is Rory O'Sullivan, UK brand manager for Martin Miller's Gin. Hello, Rory.
Pleasure to be here. How's it?
Thank you for coming in. I have to tell you now that Polly and Tom tell me they are on dry January.
I've heard. Do you think maybe we'll be able to twist it around and maybe do like a dry January?
I think maybe some sniffing. Can you sniff? Can you sniff spirits?
Yeah, maybe a little
during dry. Yeah. You could fall into the glass.
In the interest of television research, I can.
It's like a big moral. It's like the big ideas. So one of those big moral philosophy questions: who will crack, and how far will they crack?
You could trip and fall into the glass.
70% of your taste is through your smell anyway, so you're going to get 70% of the drink. It's fine. It's all good.
Now, I used the word Ginuary, which I heard for the first time earlier today. I'll be quite honest with you. Is it really a thing? Are people talking about Ginuary?
It's a starting trend. It's been around for a few years, but it's become more and more popular, and it's really just to do with the rise of craft gins. So loads and loads of people are seeing January as an opportunity, not to really go out and get really drunk. That's not the idea, but the whole idea of January is that you're trying something different. So you might try a new gin every day, something that you might not really expect you're going to like, and you're building that sort of like respect for how the spirit's made. Because all gins are made in a different way, and that's the fascinating thing.
I certainly grew up thinking that gin was gin. Yeah. What is talk me through this idea of craft gin? Yeah. But I am aware that gin has changed its reputation. There's a neighbour and friend of mine actually in Stirling has amongst other things has a company producing Kinrara gin. I know because we have a beautiful bottle of it in the house. Where has that interest come from?
So I think in Scotland, another sort of key thing you've got to look at is that a lot of people are making whiskey distilleries. And obviously, when you're aging a whiskey, you can't sell that whiskey for like 7 years, minimum, right? So what do you do in the meantime? So you're seeing loads and loads of new Scottish gins come out, and that's sort of like tying in with the whiskey industry as well. Obviously, there's people making gin just sort of standalone, but a lot of the rise in sort of Scottish gin has come from that. It's all to do with grants from the government. So the Scottish government have been really supportive of setting up new distilleries to see it as a craft. But in terms of like craft gin, so Martin Miller's essentially led the way. Since 1999, it was the world's first ever super premium gin. So before that point, the idea of having a gin that cost over £20 didn't exist at all. No one really cared. It was genuinely seen as like a poor spirit. So Martin Miller really wanted to sort of flip it on its head and sort of like revolutionise the gin industry and make the world's first super premium. So split distillations, Icelandic spring water, all these things going on.
Icelandic spring water?
Yeah.
Let's bring some gin down the line here. Let's just...
shall we make a little drink?
See, smell and perhaps taste, some of us. What's actually going on here?
So this is our original blends. So that's the one that came out in 1999. Obviously, we've launched loads of other sort of different products since that. But this is the baby, so this is the iconic one. But the one way it's made, what's quite really interesting about it is...
Is it flavoured with juniper? I mean, is it classic gin?
Yeah, so you have to have juniper in gin. Like that's just the one really rule. So this is a still gin, but it's London dry style. So 10 botanicals, very sort of traditional. But what Martin Miller wanted to do is he looked at really how things were distilled. So what sort of reactions happen, because everything evaporates at different points. That's the science behind it. So he realised that the citrus obviously would go first. So that's the most volatile. So he distilled all that separately, and then he put the juniper, the roots and the spices in another one. So there's two different things. We're kind of blending it like you blend a scotch. And then the water you use, obviously, really, really, really important. This whole idea of like if 60% of that bottle is water, water has taste, so it can have character. So the water we use is officially one of the purest waters in the world, but it's 10 times purer than like French bottled waters like Evian and all that sort of thing. So we're 20 parts per million, and the average French water is 200 parts. But because of that, the really cool thing about it is that because we leave these minerals in, it actually gives flavour, and it actually makes a really sort of well-rounded, sort of like smooth mouthfeel on the palate. Anyway, we'll make some drinks.
Okay.
I'm going to make a bee's knees, if you don't mind. I don't know if you've heard of a bee's knees. Okay. So bee's knees is probably one of my favourite cocktails in the world to make.
I have never heard of such a thing.
Oh, it's so simple. So it's gin, lemon, and honey. That's it. But the beauty of it is obviously because the drink's so simple, when you're... shall I make you one, or shall we just make one?
I'm going to sniff one.
You're going to sniff one? OK, no worries.
Make a couple of
I'll make a couple of them.
Okay.
So, obviously, for one, it's 50. So then we've got two, we'll do 100.
OK.
So nice and simple. You can make this drink at home. Really, really easy. But the one big thing you should sort of look at is obviously have a good quality gin, but have a good quality honey as well. So we're going to use Bermondsey Street bees.
That must change the texture and consistency. I mean,
Exactly.
honey's not... Well, it's a liquid, but it's a fairly thick liquid.
Especially this one. So this one's a creamed Ling-Leather honey. Ling-Heather honey, sorry.
OK.
But yeah, really, really thick. Honey's got a lot of flavour. So honey is like quite cool as an ingredient because it's very, very similar to gin in the way that gins, when we're distilling things, we're going around, we're foraging for our botanicals. So
What botanicals? Define that for me.
So botanicals essentially are different sort of flavour. Botanical can be anything, but it normally comes from a flower or sort of peels or roots, that sort of thing.
Okay.
And it's actually used to flavour gin.
So it's flavourings?
Yeah, pretty much. So we basically distill these, but it can be anything. It can be sort of roots, spices, anything. It's put into the mixture.
Would it have occurred to you to put honey in gin? I mean, honey and whiskey, obviously, for the purposes of a hot toddy.
Absolutely.
Honey and gin.
Honey and gin is delicious, but the one important thing to do, especially when using such a thick honey as well, is make sure you stir all the ingredients together. Because if you just shake it, it's just going to have a big lump of honey. So when you're making them at home, that's what I'd advise you to do, because otherwise it's just going to be really, really sour. I'll put this over here. I don't want to ruin the beautiful studio. So here we've got some lemon juice. We're going to put the same amount as the honey. So the honey would be 25 ml. If it's liquid, so you use a spoon. We're going to do 25 ml for each. So we put 50 for the two.
OK.
Then that's it. Then we're going to ice it up.
And you talked about the explosion in craft gin brands. Why is it when I go into a supermarket now and I look at the gin aisle almost, you'll see, and there's such a cornucopia of different brands, but also different colours? Because my perception of gin, I'm not a gin drinker, but is that it's plain in colour, and you can mix it. So why are you seeing all these different coloured gins? Do they taste differently, or?
It does taste completely different. So a lot of those will just be colourings. So people just want to just consume it to make it look nice.
Turquoise,
Yeah, but then you do get some other gin companies. So there's a few where you sort of like macerate sort of fresh berries and strawberries, or like there's a really traditional thing called slow gin where you get slow berries and put it inside. So things like that do exist. The pink gins do tend to be on average just like there for the colour. But yeah, we don't necessarily make a pink gin for Martin Miller's. But we've got some seasonal ones, but not a flavour.
Right.
But yeah, the good thing is that because it's been going on for so long and the demand, it means that there's a gin for every occasion. So it's like the one thing that's really great to be working with gin is you taste someone and it's like, oh, I don't like gin. It's like, you've had one gin. Gins can taste completely different. Gins can be really fruity, they can be really spice forward, they can be sort of like really sharp and peppery, they can be citrusy. So the idea of saying you don't like gin doesn't really make any sense because it's like a flavoured vodka, essentially. You know?
And it makes a big difference what you put in it as well, because, my mum would always have a gin with a slice of lemon. But then, there are some gins where they say, put in a peel of cucumber or some with a strawberry. And it does really change the character of the whole drink.
And has, are cocktails back? Because I'm thinking in this time of lockdown, where obviously people have been entertaining at home, with the consent of the authorities or not, has it inspired illicit cocktail experimentation?
It has.
Let's bring this on.
Shall I shake this?
Yeah.
I'll answer your question first. So lockdown has been like an amazing thing because people have started to respect things more. So it really come from sort of this idea of recreating a restaurant experience. So people, when in lockdown, hated it.
Let's have them.
Right? Yep. People in lockdown hated not being able to go to their favourite bar, not seeing their favourite bartender, having their favourite drink. So people sort of took it upon themselves, like, let's get creative, let's make things at home.
Okay.
Which really, really, really helped us. But also, it meant like a greater appreciation because people now understand what bees needs it. They understand what goes into Martin Miller's gin. So it helps.
Right, here we go, everybody.
So
January or not,
slide it along the bar.
Dry January, January.
I've made two, so we'll split them between you, just so you can smell. We'll have to.
Well, let's just see.
Okay, thank you. Yeah.
There we go. I'll do the small ones first.
You're not going to have it?
Yep.
The small ones.
Okay. There we go. There you go, a little smell.
See, when I think of gin, Neil, I just can't get out of my mind the Hogarth painting.
Oh, Gin Lane.
Gin Lane.
Gin Lane.
Mother's Ruin. It's just.
Yes, it hasn't always had a happy reputation, has it?
No, it hasn't.
Well, good health. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. Yep.
Right, what do we...
Cheers, guys.
Cheers. What was I thinking?
It's very distinctive on the palate.
It smells amazing. This is like the hardest thing I've ever done.
That's one of those dangerous things, isn't it? That doesn't actually taste alcoholic to me.
Yeah.
That's a worry.
And if you think in that glass right now, this is the beauty of a cocktail, to be fair, is that you get something that essentially just tastes like juice. The point of a well-balanced drink is that it's not meant to be like forward on anything. It shouldn't be aggressive in your face. That glass right there is half of that glass is alcohol. We just put a little bit of honey and a little bit of lemon, but it's complementing in such a way that it's making it really rounded off, and it's a nice experience.
That's a delicious offering.
I'm pleased you're enjoying it.
Yes,
it does taste, though, more like the kind of drink you would drink in the morning with your cornflakes as a healthy...
That's
probably not a good sign, isn't it?
Yeah. An insight into
that's how it starts.
I'm going to stay around at your house.
Yeah.
No, honestly. In terms of like gin and honey, we actually do, as a brand, we do a lot of things for Well Bee Day. So if you don't know if you're going to UN Well Bee Day, it's May the 20th.
My reaction to that is that that's very comforting. And I would have thought of whiskey and brandies as a country. That is a very comforting flavour.
Yeah.
Many thanks. Cheers once again. And thank you, Polly.
Gin Time Saturdays.
Tom, and thank you, Rory.
Cheers.
Thank you for bringing that to us. That is delicious. Yeah. Okay. Well, that was a very refreshing end to our show. That's all from me on Neil Oliver Live. Mark Dolan is up next on Tonight Live. But first, and inevitably, here's the weather. Cheers once again.
Looking ahead to tomorrow's weather, and the UK is looking a little wet to start in the north, but as this band of rain clears south, things will brighten up. Let's take a look at the details. There may be a few lingering showers around first thing tomorrow in the southwest. For most, though, it will be a dry start with some sunny breaks in the cloud. Meanwhile, in the southeast, things are set to get off to a fine start with some lengthy sunny spells. It will be chilly, though. There will be showery outbreaks of rain across parts of Wales, mainly to the south. Further northern, it should be drier and sunnier as well. Around Manchester tomorrow, it will get off to a mostly fine start with some sunshine. However, a weather front is going to spread from the north during the morning, leading to outbreaks